Okay, moving on in the cardiovascular system, let's talk about the tubes. All the tubes, your blood vessels. So there are three kinds of blood vessels essentially: arteries, veins, and capillaries. Arteries take blood away from the heart. Always carry blood away from the heart. That's the definition of an artery. Now, this blood doesn't often students confuse arteries. The definition of arteries is that arteries carry oxygenated blood. Arteries don't always carry oxygenated blood. This is the pulmonary artery. It is not carrying oxygenated blood. So don't mess that up. Arteries don't always carry oxygenated blood. And so arteries, because they're carrying blood away from the heart, they are subject to blood pressure. We talked about blood pressure in the last unit. Blood pressure is measured at the arteries. It's measured from arteries. So as a result, because they are getting all of the pressure, they are getting high blood pressure right from your heart, the walls of arteries are much thicker than they are compared to veins. Capillaries, unique. We'll talk about capillaries in a second. So, and arteries, they have muscle. They are a thick muscle. We can look at, we can see a cross section of arteries here. There's a cross section of an artery. Oh, I need to do it over here. So here's an artery. This is an artery. This is a vein. And you can see the wall of the artery is thicker, and arteries are very rigid. This artery is rigid. It is keeping its shape. Within the muscle here of the artery, within the muscle fibers, those thick muscle fibers are elastic fibers. Basically, they increase the strength. And so what can happen, so basically what they do is, as the blood pumps through the artery, they expand and they contract. The arteries could expand, and those elastic fibers keep the arterial shape. And so that blood pressure stays high in the arteries. The reason for that is because the arteries, the purpose that they're serving is get the blood as fast as possible to where it's going. Because there are muscles, there are tissues, there are whatever organs that need. The liver needs oxygen. The heart of the muscle of the heart needs oxygen. There's actually, as blood leaves the aorta, one of the first turns that it makes is to turn around and feed the heart muscle, because inside this blood that's inside the heart is not what powers the heart. The heart has its own arteries and capillaries. So arteries, high pressure, thick-walled. What else do we say about it? High pressure, thick-walled. They conduct blood away from the heart and towards the capillaries where gas exchange can happen. And you will find arteries, because they're high pressure, they're dangerous, right? If they pop, you can lose all your blood. There's some very dangerous spots. You have the carotid arteries up here. If you get sliced along here, you'll squirt blood out. So that, there's dangerous arteries here. There's an artery down here near your crotch. That's a dangerous artery. But you will find arteries, they are close to bone. So they are deep inside tissue. So if we look at this image here, if you imagine this is like a cutaway, like this would be an arm or a leg, and all the muscle's been taken out, a lot of the tissue's been taken out, a lot of the blood vessels have been taken out, and there's the bone in the middle of the leg, there's the skin, there's the top layer, and arteries will be running along the bones, and then they will branch off into what are called arterioles, and then the arterioles branch off into capillary beds. And then the capillary beds slowly transition into venules and then into veins, which are at the surface of the skin or near the surface of the skin. You can see some veins. I don't know, you can see there's a vein there. As I get older, I'm not I'm not as pumped, but there's some veins that you can see, and the blood travels back to the heart. So the definition of veins is they return blood. They head away from capillary beds and back to the heart. What else do we know about arteries? And so arteries, fastest blood velocity. We're trying to get the blood as fast as we can to the tissues here. They're like a freeway for blood. The highest blood pressure. This is where we measure blood pressure. So on average, 120 millimeters of mercury over 80 millimeters of mercury, and usually deep inside the tissues. Now, so that's the arteries, and we saw an image of what they look like. Veins. If we look at our vein here, look at the vein. Look, it's all loosey-goosey and stretchy and flowy. So veins are not rigid. They lack those elastic fibers in the muscular layer here that keep the rigid shape of the arteries. They are a lot stretchier. There's not a lot of the muscle layer is very thin. It's a lot thinner, so they can bend and they can squeeze, because blood flows in the veins. Not, the heart is still pumping, but it's not the principal thing that is propelling the blood in the veins is actually them being squished and squeezed. So they are loosey-goosey on purpose. And what is squishing and squeezing veins is what I just did now. Skeletal muscle, my muscles moving. When the muscles contract, your skeletal muscles, the muscles that make you move, they squish all the veins as they contract, and that squirts the blood forward. Now, what keeps the blood from going backwards, going the wrong way in veins, are a series of valves. There are a series of one-way valves. They only open one way, and so the blood will move a little bit like this. The area down here gets squeezed, the valve opens, the blood flows a little bit in the vein, fills in here, more blood comes along, and that's how blood moves along in your veins, is with the action of your skeletal muscles. And veins are near the surface, so when we see, when you get a shot or an injection or whatever, a saline solution, they are plugging into your vein. You've got a vein here and these major veins. I don't know. I'm trying to find some veins. I'm kind of veinless. Here we go. There's a vein. And so blood pressure and velocity in the veins is very low. It's dependent on how much muscle activity. The more you're moving, the more you're squishing that blood in those veins, the more you're going to be propelling it. The pressure is going to go up a little bit, and the velocity is going to go up. And the thing about veins is that they conduct blood away from the heart. They're not always just deoxygenated veins. Not always they conduct blood to the heart. Veins conduct blood to the heart, and again, they're not always carrying deoxygenated blood because, for example, the pulmonary vein, which is coming back from the lungs and into the heart here, into the left atrium, is a vein, and it's carrying oxygenated blood. So don't make that mistake. And what do we want to say about that? So why does the pressure drop so huge when you get to the veins, when you had such high blood pressure from the arteries? And the reason for that is branching. So if we look here at our image of our blood vessels, or sort of this image. So here's the artery. This blood is shooting along from the artery every time the heart is contracting. Every time the heart contracts, something like 70 millimeters of blood gets squeezed into the system and pushed along. And so you've got this tube. The surface area of arteries is very small. You don't need a lot of surface area here because you're just getting the blood from A to B. And then it branches here, and then here are these capillary beds. So we're going to talk about capillaries now. Capillaries are tiny, tiny, one cell thick blood vessels. They're tiny. And they're all over. They're everywhere. My whole face, everywhere skin is covered in capillaries because they are bringing the oxygen and the nutrients to all of your cells. So your cells need to be near a capillary. Their diffusion is not going to bring the stuff. We don't do, it is diffusion. Ultimately, the stuff diffuses out of the capillaries, but it's not going to be diffusing across a whole bunch of cells. The cells are greedy. They're going to gobble it up. So there's always needs to be a cells near a capillary. So there's millions and millions, hundreds of millions, thousands of millions of capillaries all over your body. So these arterioles are dividing and dividing and dividing and dividing and dividing into smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until finally you get these one cell thick. And there's lots and lots of capillaries. Now, if you were to take all of the capillaries in your body, just the capillaries, and lump them together like this, lump them together, and then somehow join them up so when they were together and make them into one big blood vessel, that cross-section would be very large. So you know what I mean? The diameter would be really big of that blood vessel. If you take all the arteries, even though the arteries are big, when you look at an individual artery, they're big, but you lumped all the arteries in your body, you lumped them all together, and then you made them join together to make one blood vessel, that cross-section of that blood vessel would not be as big as the cross-section of all of the capillaries. So the total cross-sectional area of capillaries is really large. Now, if you know stuff about physics and fluid dynamics, which I don't, when liquid moves from a small pipe into a large pipe, the pressure drops and the velocity drops. It slows down. And that's what's happening. Even though these are tiny tubes, but because there's so many of them, they add up to being a large pipe. So what happens is high pressure arteries empty out into these capillaries, and as they go into the capillaries, because the branching is so much, every time it branches it slows down, the blood slows right down and the pressure drops. And the reason is we need that pressure to drop because capillary walls are microscopic, are tiny. They're one cell layer thick. When we look at, here's the artery and the vein, they're huge, they're multi-cells. But if we looked at if we could see a capillary here, it would be tiny, tiny, one cell layer thick, and the capillary is also tiny, so that one red blood cell can squeeze through, shed its oxygen, and that oxygen can diffuse out of the capillary across that one cell layer out of the capillary into the extracellular fluid and then get gobbled up by the cells, and then wastes can diffuse efficiently in it. If the blood pressure here was super high, the capillaries would just explode. They would rip. And you have experienced capillaries breaking all the time. You break your capillary. If you've had a bruise, that's because someone hit you and shattered the capillaries there, broke some of the capillaries, and blood filled that area, and extracellular fluid mixed up in the extracellular fluid, and you got a bruise. So they're easily broken. So the pressure has to drop, and the reason the pressure drops is because of the total cross-sectional area of all the capillaries. So, things we've learned about capillaries is that they are very, very small, but they add up to a lot of volume. And making them smaller and smaller and branching increases the surface area, basically, between the blood vessels and the tissue. You have lots of tubes. You have a huge amount of surface area now to carry out gas exchange, because that's what we need to do. We need to carry out gas exchange to have oxygen go out to the tissues, carbon dioxide come back in from the tissues, also nutrients and waste to enter again. Almost done. So, but last thing about capillary beds and capillaries. So here's an artery. These large arteries branch off to something called arterioles. They're just smaller arteries. At the base of these capillary beds, okay, where all of this branching happens, are muscular sphincters that can open and close and control the flow of blood into these capillaries. So you can close these. It's an involuntary. It's controlled by your medulla oblongata, your autonomic nervous system. You can close these and lower blood pressure in here even more, raise blood pressure in your arteries, in your arteries. But mainly what these sphincters are for is for homeostasis, controlling temperature. So if you are hot, if you are doing a lot of activity, you're burning a lot of ATP, you're creating a lot of heat this way, your body is getting hot. Remember, you don't want your enzymes to denature, you don't want things to get too hot, you want to cool your body down. So what happens is there's the top layer here, you muscle, skin, you start to sweat, okay? You start to sweat. And your core, the inside of your body where you're burning, that's really hot. All the inside of your muscles is really hot. So this blood here, this arterial blood, is hot. It's flowing through here, it's hot. So what happens is these sphincters open. They open to the max. They open as much as they can. So as much hot blood goes into all of the capillary beds, especially at the surface of your skin, all of those, and in the muscles here, all of the surface of your skin, all close to your skin, those sphincters open. That's why when you become red, you get flushed, right? When you get red. When you get hot, you get flushed, right? People turn red, some people more than others. Also, these sphincters open when you get embarrassed. It's an autonomic response, when you get embarrassed and you blush. That's all these capillaries filling up with oxygenated blood, filling up with blood, because these sphincters have opened. So now all of this tissue up here by the skin, near the skin, is full, is saturated with hot blood. And what's happening is now that hot blood, there's a lot of surface area, and this sweat on the surface of your skin is evaporating. And when water evaporates, that activity of turning water from liquid, from sweat into vapor, absorbs energy. It takes energy to do that. And what it's doing is it's taking the energy out of that hot blood that now there's lots of near the surface of your skin. And so while it's evaporating, it's cooling that blood. It's absorbing that kinetic energy and cooling that blood. And so that heat is radiating out. And now the blood is cooled and it can return back and start to cool your body. So that's when you are too hot, when you're hyperthermic. You start to cool yourself off. That's one of the ways you cool yourself off, is by opening these sphincters. Now, when you're hypothermic, so you are cold, you were born and raised in Vancouver, you don't know what cold weather is, you go and visit for the first time ever some family in Saskatchewan when it's freezing cold, and you take like a winter jacket that you bought at Costco in Vancouver, like not, like a $40 jacket from Costco in Vancouver. It's a down jacket. And then you quickly realize when you get to Saskatchewan that this jacket does nothing, and you are going to freeze and die. And say your family forgot that you were coming, and you're left outside of their house in the snow which you've never seen before because you've grown up in Vancouver and it really rarely snows here. What will happen now? Your body is like, oh my goodness, I'm cold. I've got to protect the brain and the heart and the liver. I got to protect these important organs. I need them to stay warm. I need them to stay hot. So what the body does is it closes these sphincters. These sphincters close. So hot blood is not going to the surface of your skin. That's why your lips turn blue. You start to look pale when you're cold because you're not getting a lot of blood flow into your extremities, into the surfaces. Your body is keeping that heat in the interior. It's keeping that hot blood on the inside. Now, if this is taken to an extreme, your body will keep getting the stimulus cold, 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 and the result will be your autonomic services system is close, close, close those sphincters. It will keep closing those sphincters. And it might keep them closed so long that your extremities, your fingers, start to become starved for oxygen, and maybe they die. The cells start to die. Your fingers go numb. That's why your fingers go numb. When you're really cold, your fingers start to go numb. And the cells start to die, and then if it's really cold, if you're in Saskatchewan or Edmonton or whatever, to tell you the truth, I've never been, in all my years of life, I have never traveled to the awful, terrible parts of Canada, the real Canada, during the winter time. I've gone there in the summer. It's bugs, they got bug thing. But say you were, and what will happen is these cells die, and it's really cold, and so the liquid in your cells, the cytoplasm, starts to freeze and crystallize and break open the cells. Actually, these cells get broken and damaged and die, and they turn black and gross and flake off, and that's frostbite. Your nose, your cheeks are subject to frostbite, your fingers, and that is from your body trying to protect these major organs and keeping the hot fluids, the hot blood in the interior. So that's homeostasis. So that is that's the vessels of the body, the blood vessels. There you go.